Alright, so here's one a bit more on programming. Programming, usually you'll have a loop, right? The loop is like the space or the game board. It's where everything happens in. It is like the matrix, essentially, of the programming. You have a loop so that things repeat, at least in a game. The fact that the game keeps going is because it's in a loop. Everything keeps repeating, right? The numbers, the display of the numbers probably repeats, or when they change, right? Enemies respawn, items respawn, etc., etc. It's in a loop. And then the main two parts of the program, or programming in general, is data and logic. And data is usually your database, your data types, like an integer, or like a character or a string, like text, right? So basically numbers and text, essentially, is data types, right? And you make more complicated data types through, depending on the programming language, you'll have like bundles of data types. For example, in C, the C programming language, you have a struct, which is essentially a section of memory where it like says, okay, this area of your memory, this block, is going to be taken up by multiple things, right? So you might have multiple integers, which are just numbers, right, that you do math with. So you have like 10 integers, and maybe they're values of something, and you have them in like a big collection, right? Also in Lua, it has a very flexible, nice data type, or package and a database type. I forget if it's called library or something like that, and you can have all kinds of things in there, right? And so data is just like numbers and letters and stuff, right? And also it's pictures and sound, mind you, and three-dimensional objects. So it's things. It's the yin or the feminine of whatever you're making. And as I said, logic, which is actions. This is stuff like, technically, loops you can include into the logic, because sometimes you'll use a loop. It's stuff like if statements, else statements, etc. And or, if A equals A, or A equals B, then do this, etc. It's mathematics, for example, so plus, divide, minus. So 2 plus 2 equals 4, 2 negate 2 equals 0, etc. And logic is like a functional thing that manipulates data. So that's what you've got to understand. So data is the passive thing which stores, or the data types store data, but then the logic changes the data. The logic is the masculine, right, in this context. It's the active thing. In practical terms, in a video game, you're going to have to apply this to your own kind of programming. I've only really done like, games and visual novels and such. But you want to walk. Moving, the ability to press WASD, or up, down, left, right, it's an action, and usually your actions will be functions if you're using functional programming. Right? You have the movement in a function that says movement function. Of course, you can just have it in code if you want, but if you want to have it like nice and neat, you have your movement function, and then you just paste your movement function in, the main loop, the game loop, right? And if you want a NPC to move, you give them the movement function, and then maybe you make an edited version or something of it, who knows. So it handles the movement, right? But then the data is how much you move, how quickly you move, where you move to. You know, that can be stored in data, right? So where your character is located, or where the NPC is located, is stored in data. But the logic, the mathematics that tell it to move, how much, you know, to kind of to plus and minus and, you know, etc., and to deal with different dimensions and X, Y, Z dimensions is kind of like logic. But you're using data as well so data is like frequency modulation or pressure modulation. It's how much, how little and how much. Like a spectrum, you go up and down, left and right. These are spectrums, right? And the active is like, that's making it do something. Otherwise, you just have cold data, which says, okay, speed equals 10, but you don't have the function, the movement function, which says x plus 10 plus speed, x plus speed when, you know, when like WASD or some kind of key up, down, left, right is pressed. That's the active functional part. Again, you want to talk to an NPC. The action, you click on them, or you press enter to talk to the NPC, the storekeeper or something. That's an action. What they say to you is data. That you have a preset text, series of text, which the NPC says, hello, you know, would you like to buy something? But you've pressed a button, and when you press the button, something happens. Probably what happens is that you access a window managing function, which then creates a visual box and then has a space in that box where you are allowed to have text, which is where your data goes. And maybe you're allowed to have a picture. If we think of like a two-dimensional RPG, like a JRPG, you'll have a little face picture of them, and the face picture is data. It's stored as data. But where the face picture goes, how big it is, you know, that's also data, but it's processed by the function, which is the action part, which is the logic, right? Then you want to buy an item. Again, the ability to buy and sell is dictated by logic. But when you lose gold and the storekeeper gains gold, or you sell something, you take their gold, they lose gold, you take, you know, or money or whatever you want, that is, the gold or the money is stored as a data type, as an integer, right? And the name gold or currency or money, whatever, is again another data type. It's stored as a string. The manipulation or change or modulation is the logic, which is probably a buying and selling function or some kind of merchantry function. Or you just you're unorganized and you just wrote it out in your main area, or you just copy paste it or something. I don't know. Well, technically, if you wanted to, you know, you'd probably want to store it as a function, because you'd want to repeat this, right? You want to do it over and over again. So who knows? Depending on how, you know, neat and organized and good you are at coding. And of course, the function, the buying and selling function, would probably access a database of the merchant's, you know, name, the text they say, the items they have for sale, and the items would access another database, which would be the item database, of saying how much is it usually worth, what's its name, you know, how much HP does it recover, how much, or what's its like description, you know, what does it do, what's it, you know, how does it modulate or change the game world, you know, does it unlock certain things, give you a certain ability, is it Is it a HP potion? Does it give you experience points? What's it do? You got to think about this, and then you got to think about how to store this in data and what data you're trying to change, which is the active part, which is going to rely on your functions, and which is holding logic, essentially. The same way that a data type is holding data, the function is generally holding logic, so to speak. It's like a factory, but the factory needs raw material. It needs like rubber or plastic or something to make a plastic bowl. But it has the function or ability to heat the plastic pellets and to press them into the bowl shape. The same way that your function has the ability to create a window, which just kind of means like an area, like a box. It has the ability to create text and the picture or whatever other things you want to add, and lets you click on it to escape, or lets you click on other areas to forward the text index, the number in the text, to get more text. You just have to feed it the data to tell it which NPC it's trying to get text from, or how large you want the window to be, and that's going to be stored in X, Y value probably, and a height width value. And if you're doing spatial programming, three-dimensional programming, which is just spatial stuff, then you're using an X, Y, and a Z. So you're not just using left and right, up and down, you're also using depth, which is the third dimension. But if you understand how to make two-dimensional programs and applications, making three-dimensional shouldn't be that difficult, because you're only adding an extra dimension. Anyway, that's probably all for this one. So to summarize, pretty much everything is stored in a loop. That's like the world, or the kind of application, so to speak. Unless it's like a little application which you type in a number and you get a result, and that's it, and it closes itself after you click OK. Super simple, or you just paste a file on it and it processes and changes the file type or something. Really simple applications like decoders or something. Otherwise, it's in a loop, right? And in the loop, anything which is almost like a physical thing, so to speak, is data. So I'm talking audio, pictures, 3D models, any form of text that you want to display. So like UI text, character text, names, what they're saying, descriptions, etc. And any form of numbers, which again is you can kind of link into text. This is all stored as a data type or as data. Depending if it's like in a folder, you'll have pictures, etc. And then to basically make these things alive, so instead of just having a picture of an NPC, like a little body picture where they're just kind of there in the map, instead of having that, to make them walk around, you have to use functions, right? You use functions, which is essentially just encapsulating a bunch of logic, which tells it to move up, down, left, and right, which is indicated by X and Y values, or to become larger and smaller, width and height, or depth. If it's the third dimension, you're essentially making it alive, so to speak. You're making the data alive, animating it through functions, which is how you have the interactive world, or the interactive thing of the program. And you can take this to, even if it's just like a two-dimensional like if it's not like a game, if it's like a regular program, if you have buttons in your program, for example, the recording software, it says stop recording. Stop recording, of course, the text is data, the button is data, the visuals is everything that I'm seeing and hearing is data, but what if I click it, if I interact with it, is logic. It essentially does something to a file, or it does something to a piece of data, to the numbers, to the values, and that's how the program functions and works and is animated. And then to end off, if you use, for example, object-oriented programming, I don't use that personally, but for those who do, the way that I see it is simply an object is just both data and logic together. You've encapsulated the whole thing the same way that in the past, or for people who still do it, we use a bunch of different files. So you have a bunch of different files interacting with each other. For example, in a game, it would be your character, which has all of the data sheets of the character, but it also has that they're able to move, and you can click different buttons and you can move them, and then you can and depending on how much experience points they get, will change their level, and that'll change their stats, and they can hold gold and all these things, right? That will be in a folder, and your master controller, which is the master loop, which is just the thing which you paste in the window manager area, the character manager, the NPC manager, the stat manager, the ability manager, the item database. So some of these files will be more just databases, like a list of items or abilities or enemies and NPCs and whatever, and some of them will be more functional, like the combat, like the communication, maybe a crafting system, for example, or you can just have it all in the same file, which is it's a bit savage, but it's a lot simpler if you're able to deal with large amounts of text. If you need to segment everything, you put them in folders or you put them in objects. And if in like a software creation tool or a game maker, for example, everything's an object. Your physics is an object, rigid body, basically deciding how the physics works, how bodies interact, or your hitbox thing, your animation manager, your audio manager. These are all objects because they manipulate data, but they also store data, because you say for the audio manager, you say, all right, I want this file to be in the audio manager, so it can hold that, it can store it, but it can also manage how to play the audio, how loud, when to play it, which you control through programming. So then you also make objects, is in master objects, like character object, but then you add another object which says this holds and displays the visual, like the sprite, the picture of the character, right, or the picture of the button and the text of it, or something like that. So it's like an object within an object. That's how it, like a software manager tool, maybe like a UI tool, or I've never used like .NET or any of those things, but or Qt or whatever. I think that's how they're basically just like game making tools for like normal people who work in industry, right? Because you can just use Godot or Unity. I mean, the gambling industry does it. The medical industry, I think, does it. A lot of people use Unity for whatever. Godot is sponsored, I think, by the gambling industry. Is it them? I think they're both sponsored by the gambling industry, to be honest. Because they use that software because it's so useful and so easy and it handles everything, right? So they use it for their programs instead of using, some other framework or whatever. So when you're using these tools, just realize that chances are they are object orientated and everything is just an object. And then you just have like objects in like the master scene, right? Which is what handles everything. And then you just compile it and package it, and that's how it kind of works. Otherwise, to simplify it, if you use just I just use C and Rayleigh, but currently, or Lua and Love2D, they're both very good. Keeping it simple, right? You're basically just using data types and packaging the data types in structs or libraries or whatever, and then you're using logic and you're packaging the logic in functions to be reused, and then you're just putting it in a master loop or series of loops, kind of like an enum, where you have like the main menu will be one part of the enum, the game world is another, the game menu is another. I use a different way to do that. I don't use an enum, but people use that for like segmenting. It's kind of like in Pokemon, you've got the attack phase or the battle. Is that how it works? It's the battle phase, the attack phase. I don't know. Whatever. You probably understand. That's about enough for this one. Of course, check the link in the description and have a good day if you want.